Marcel Dion's often regarded as the best NHL player to never win a Stanley Cup, and actually, he never made it to the final, never even made it past the second round. The best Kings team that he played on came in 1980-81, the team had 99 points, but they were upset in the first round by the Rangers, who finished with 25 fewer points. But even though the Kings just had 63 points in 82, that was the year of the miracle on Manchester when the Kings overcame a 5-0 deficit in the third period against the Oilers and miraculously were able to upset them, and Dion had 4 goals and 3 assists to help the Kings defeat Gretzky's Oilers. Over 43 playoff games with LA, he recorded 20 goals and 23 assists, so he wasn't quite as effective as the 6-time 50-goal scorer that he was in the regular season. Dion is just one of dozens of NHL legends who never won a Stanley Cup, and that's the topic for today's video. I'm choosing one player per team who had to be a key contributor to that franchise, but never won the Stanley Cup anywhere in his career. That's important. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Which of these players surprises you the most? And also, once we're done with the Pacific Division, just see the timestamp down below. I've got a very special channel announcement to make. Anyway, let's roll on. For the Anaheim Ducks, this one's pretty clear. I think it's Paul Kariya. Now, he advanced to Game 7 of the 0-3 final against the Devils. We all know that he scored the off-the-floor on the board goal in Game 6 after being knocked out by Scott Stevens, but he doesn't remember that goal or playing in Game 7. Now, apart from that goal, his other biggest playoff moment probably came in '97 when he scored the overtime winner in Game 6 against the Coyotes, but they lost to the eventual champion Red Wings. In 3 postseason appearances with Anaheim, Kariya played 35 games, notching 14 goals and 15 assists for 29 points, but as we know, concussions cut his career short. For the San Jose Sharks, I've got Joe Thornton over Patrick Marleau. Thornton's arrival in San Jose was transformative for the franchise. He was the only player to win the Hart Trophy after being traded in the middle of the season. The furthest that Jumbo advanced came in 2016. They went to the Stanley Cup final, and even at age 36, in 24 games, he put up 3 goals and 18 assists, but the Sharks lost to the Penguins in 6 games. In the playoffs, he's best known for his series-winning goal against the Los Angeles Kings, the first time both teams met in the postseason. That came in 2011, and in 144 games with the Sharks, Thornton scored 25 goals and recorded 90 assists for 115 points. For the Vegas Golden Knights, although Robin Lehner did take them deep into the playoffs, when we're talking about overall career and body of work, I've chosen Max Pacioretty. He scored 15 goals and 15 assists in 36 playoff games with the Knights. He went to the conference final twice, his best run coming in 2021, and even though he missed nearly the whole first round, he returned to score 5 goals, including 3 game winners, and added 6 assists in 13 games. But as effective as he was in the second round, he went cold against his former team, the Canadiens, in the conference final. And speaking of which, his best run with Montreal was in the conference final in 2014. They lost in 6 games to the Rangers. For the Seattle Kraken, I wanted to choose Mark Giordano, but he wasn't there for a full season, so I've chosen Jordan Eberle because he's had a lengthy career and is also known as Mr. Clutch. He's played in over 1,000 games between the Oilers, Islanders, and Kraken, but hasn't made it to the final just yet. His closest run came with the Islanders in 2020. They made it all the way to the conference final, but they were stifled against Andrei Vasilevsky and the Lightning. Eberle pushed the series to 6 games with his 5th goal of the playoffs, and that came in double overtime. He was also instrumental in the Kraken's surprising playoff run in 2023, scoring 6 goals and 5 assists over 14 games, including the overtime winner against the Avalanche in Game 4. Now for the Vancouver Canucks, I usually pick the Sedin twins as a package deal, but let's just focus on one player, so let's go with Pavel Bure. Like the Sedins, Bure came within 1 game of winning the Cup, and that came in 1994 against the President's Trophy winning Rangers. The back-to-back 60-goal scorer kept the Canucks run alive with a double overtime tally against the favored Calgary Flames in Game 7 of the first round. He led the 1994 playoffs with 16 goals and 15 assists in just 24 games, and overall in 60 playoff games with Vancouver, he amassed 34 goals and 32 helpers. But after his tenure with the Canucks, he only made the playoffs 2 other times. He still made the Hall of Fame, winning the Rocket Richard Trophy in back-to-back years with the Florida Panthers. For the Calgary Flames, it's gotta be Iggy Jerome Iginla, another Hall of Famer who came within 1 goal of a Stanley Cup. This came with Calgary back in 2004, and of course, we remember the no-goal call for Martin Gelinas in Game 6 against the Lightning. In 26 games, he led the playoffs with 13 goals, including 3 game winners. But after that, the Flames never won a playoff series during his tenure there. In 54 games with Calgary in the postseason, he recorded 28 goals and 21 assists. And after his time in Calgary, the furthest that he advanced was in 2013 with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they lost in the conference final to the Bruins. For the Edmonton Oilers, you could talk about Ryan Smith, but I gotta say Connor McDavid, and certainly Leon Draisaitl could be that guy as well. Let's focus on McDavid though. In 2016-17, he was crucial in getting Edmonton to their first playoff appearance in 11 years. And if it wasn't for that meltdown in the third period of Game 5 against the Ducks, they may have gone to the final that year. His best run came in 22 when he guided the Oilers to a Western Conference final appearance. They were swept by the eventual champion Avalanche, but in those playoffs, despite playing just 16 games, he led all scorers with 33 points. His biggest goal came in the second round in a reignited Battle of Alberta. In Game 5, he scored the series-winning goal at 5:03 into overtime. Alright Twisters, so quick announcement here. I want to continue publishing videos and do so more frequently. I want to attract more awesome hockey fans like yourselves to our channel and also everywhere on social media, and even host some meetups in person in NHL cities so I can meet you guys out there and maybe even bring Cortana. Now that's going to cost a lot of time and money, so I'm interested to see who among you would be interested in helping the success of Twisted Wrister Hockey as an investor. So when I mean investor, that means that as our channel and our community continue to grow, then the investor gets to earn back a small percentage of what Twisted Wrister Hockey earns. So if that sounds cool to you, I explain more about this in a separate web page. Just see a link to that in the pinned comment down below, and that's where you can just indicate your interest. It's completely hypothetical, there's no commitment at this point, but it helps me gauge your interest out there. So if you're on the fence and say, well, I'd like to help out, but I'm not entirely sure, well, go to the page anyway and say, hey, I'm interested, and then you can find out more information from there. Anyway, guys, that's it for now. Let's get back to our video. Now let's get to teams in the Central Division, and for the Winnipeg Jets, we're going to combine eras. I'm going to say Dale Haverchuk, but if we talked about the current version of the Jets, I'd say probably Connor Hellebuyck. So during Haverchuk's time there in the 1980s, the Jets just were having a tough time because they ran into the Oilers constantly. The year that Ducky finished runner-up for the Hart Trophy, he was injured in the team's first-round series against Calgary, and that was actually their first ever series victory as an NHL team. But after another 100-point season in '87, he carried the Jets to another first-round win against Calgary, scoring 5 goals and 5 assists in 6 games, but the Oilers took them out in the next round. In 38 playoff games with Winnipeg, Haverchuk scored 16 goals and added 33 assists for 49 points. And in the final season of his Hall of Fame career, he went to the Cup final as a member of the Flyers, but they were swept by the Red Wings. For the Nashville Predators, I'd say take your pick between Roman Josi and Pekka Rinne, but I'm choosing Pekka Rinne here. The Preds made the playoffs 8 times with a 4-time Vezina Trophy finalist and 1-time winner. His best run came in 2017 when he put together a 1.96 goals against average and .930 save percentage to help Nashville knock off the Blackhawks, Blues, and Ducks. They ultimately fell to the Penguins in 6 games. Nashville was shut out in the final 2 games though. In 89 postseason games, all with the Preds, Rinne compiled a 2.49 goals against average, a .914 save percentage, and 5 shutouts. For the St. Louis Blues, I've got Hall of Famer Bernie Federko. The deepest run that the Blues went on with him came in '86. They took out the North Stars and the Maple Leafs before falling in 7 games to the Calgary Flames, so they were 1 game from the final. But that being said, Federko actually led the playoffs in scoring with 7 goals and 14 assists in 19 games. And over the course of 91 playoff games with the Blues, over 11 different appearances in the playoffs, Federko scored 35 goals and tallied 66 assists for 101 points. Now for the Minnesota Wild, I don't think their best players have been part of a deep playoff run. Their most talented player, Kirill Kaprizov, is just 4 years into his career, so I didn't choose him. And while I could have chosen Norris Trophy runner-up Ryan Suter or another goaltender, I'm gonna roll with Mr. Minnesota, Mikko Koivu. The 1-time Selke Trophy finalist and longtime captain played in over 1,000 games with Minnesota, and over 9 postseasons he appeared in 59 games, scoring 11 goals and 17 helpers. The Wild were a good team, but they lacked that extra punch up front to get past a team like the dynasty Chicago Blackhawks. The furthest that they went with Koivu was Game 6 in the second round against those Blackhawks, and that came after they survived a 7-game series against the Avalanche. Now Koivu only scored 1 goal against Colorado, but to his credit, it came in Game 7. For the Chicago Blackhawks, I've chosen Tony Esposito. The 3-time Vezina Trophy winner and 2-time Hart Trophy finalist got his Blackhawks to the Stanley Cup final 2 times, in '71 and '73, but they came up a little short against a Canadiens franchise that was in the middle of winning 8 of the first 12 cups awarded during the expansion era. Tony O was especially lights out in the '71 playoffs, compiling a playoff best .928 save percentage and 2.20 goals against average, saving 13 goals above expected. He backstopped the Hawks to Game 7 of the final, but unfortunately he didn't get much goal support. Chicago went back to the final 2 years later, but were no match for an even stronger Habs club, falling in 6 games. But over 99 playoff games, all with the Blackhawks, Esposito compiled a .903 save percentage and 3.09 goals against average. Keep in mind, scoring was on the rise, but he still saved over 26 goals above expected. Now for the Dallas Stars, I think that you could certainly choose Marty Turco, but I've gone with longtime star Jamie Benn. Don't forget in 2015, he won the Art Ross Trophy with 87 points, and this is when scoring was down. He came back the next year for 89 points and finished as a Hart Trophy finalist. As of 2024, the closest that the Stars have come to winning a cup in this century came in the bubble playoffs of 2020. Their longtime captain tallied 8 goals and 11 assists in 27 games, but of course, they fell to the Lightning. And perhaps his most clutch moment came in the final minute of Game 4 of the conference final against the Golden Knights as his Stars took a commanding 3-1 series lead. He also scored in Game 5 to help his team advance to the Cup final, in which they fell to the Lightning in 6 games, and over 91 career playoff games with Dallas, Ben has tallied 25 goals and 42 assists. Now for the Colorado Avalanche, a lot of their legends have already won Stanley Cups. Pierre Turgeon was just briefly there, so I'm going to choose Paul Stastny. He was among the best players on the Avs while they went through a tough stretch between the powerhouse of the early 2000s and the Nathan MacKinnon-led core that we see now. Their best run with Paul came in the 07-08 season when they knocked off the Wild in a nail-biting 6 games before being swept by the eventual champion Red Wings. Stastny's best performance with Colorado came in a thrilling first-round matchup against the Wild in 14. He recorded 5 goals and 5 assists to tie for the team's scoring lead alongside rookie Nathan MacKinnon. After he left the Avalanche, he went to the conference final 4 times, each with a different team: the Blues, Jets, Knights, and Hurricanes, but he never reached the Cup final. Over 118 playoff games, he recorded 30 goals and 43 assists. And lastly, I do want to touch on the now defunct Arizona Coyotes. I've chosen, of course, Shane Doan. Donor captained the Coyotes to their only 2 series victory in a best of 7 while the team played in Arizona. Those came in 2012. The Pacific Division winners took out the vaunted Blackhawks in the first round in 6 games, then finished off the Preds in 5, with Captain Coyote scoring the lone goal in Game 4. Unfortunately, Phoenix, as they were known back then, ran into the white-hot Jonathan Quick and the LA Kings. The 35-year-old Doan scored the lone 2 goals in Game 4 as the Yotes won their only game in the conference final. He finished with 15 goals and 13 assists in 49 playoff games with the Coyotes. Now let's go to teams in the Atlantic Division. We'll start with the Buffalo Sabres, and I've selected Gilbert Perreault. With Perreault, the Sabres went to the Stanley Cup in 1975. They took the defending champion Flyers to 6 games, and despite losing, capped off an impressive 5th season in the NHL. Perreault's best personal playoff run came in 1980. The Sabres made easy work of the Canucks and Blackhawks before falling in the conference final to the Islanders in their quest for their first of 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. Perreault led his team with 10 goals and 11 helpers over 14 games. His greatest heroics came late in the 3rd period against the Hawks, helping Buffalo advance to the conference final in a sweep. And in 90 career postseason games, he scored 33 goals and 70 assists. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, there are so many amazing players to choose from, but we don't have many defensemen on this list, so let's spotlight the late great 4-time Norris Trophy finalist Borje Salming. If it wasn't for Bobby Orr and perhaps Denny Potvin, Salming might have been the best defenseman of his era. Him or another defenseman I'll talk about later. Now, Toronto wasn't the same powerhouse that they were before the expansion era kicked in. The furthest that they advanced with Salming was in the semifinals of '78. They fell in a sweep against the dynasty Montreal Canadiens. Salming was injured that whole series, but did appear in 4 games in a sizable upset over the future dynasty Islanders. At over 81 postseason career games with Toronto, Salming recorded 12 goals and 37 assists for 49 points, which is very good for one of the best 2-way defensemen since the expansion era began. For the Florida Panthers, I did think about Sasha Barkov, but I still have to give it to Roberto Luongo. His teams were mostly underwhelming. One season he saved 48 goals above expected, but his team won only 28 games. They made the playoffs just once in his 2 combined stints there. That was in 2016 when they fell in overtime in Game 6 against the Islanders. He did his part in the series, putting up a 2.05 goals against average and a .934 save percentage. He went to the playoffs 6 times with Vancouver, and as we know, he was 1 game away from the Cup in 2011, but he didn't have any goal support against Tim Thomas and the Bruins. Vancouver scored a total of 8 goals that whole series. For the Montreal Canadiens, I'm sure I'm missing a couple of legends here, but I've chosen Carey Price. The Habs made the playoffs in 10 of Price's 15 years, and although he struggled in the playoffs earlier in his career, he turned it on when he was in his prime. As most of you know, he played a huge role in getting the Habs to the final in 2021. It was certainly unexpected, and it was their first trip to the final in 28 years. Over 22 games, he compiled a 2.28 goals against average and a .924 save percentage, but the Canadiens fell in 5 games to the Lightning. They also went to the conference final in 2015 with Price. However, in Game 1, he was run into by Chris Kreider. He didn't play the rest of the series, so who knows what could have happened. The British Columbia native recorded a 2.39 goals against average, a .919 save percentage, and 8 shutouts over 92 playoff games. Now for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we have yet another goalie here, and I've chosen Ben Bishop. He's kind of the odd man out when looking at other teammates of his who eventually won a couple of Stanley Cups years later. Now, the three-time Vezina Trophy finalist appeared in only 2 postseason runs with Tampa, but didn't disappoint, compiling a 2.09 goals against average and .927 save percentage with 5 shutouts in just 36 games. You might remember he helped take Tampa to the Cup final in 2015. He became the first goalie to record back-to-back shutouts at Madison Square Garden in the playoffs, and after falling to the Blackhawks in a tight Game 6 Cup final, he revealed that he had torn his groin against the Rangers. Hockey players really are a different breed. He also nearly had a chance to lift Lord Stanley's Cup with the Dallas Stars in 2020, but a knee injury limited him to just 3 playoff games and led to his retirement a year later. The Stars lost against his former team, the Lightning, in 6 games. For the Boston Bruins, I think this one's pretty tough to call. I've chosen Cam Neely. He was part of 7 playoff runs with the Bruins, putting up 55 goals and 32 assists in 86 games. He helped guide Boston to 2 Cup final appearances against the Oilers, but they lost both times. Nonetheless, he was clutch. In the 1990 run, he tallied 12 goals and 16 helpers in just 21 games. He scored shorthanded with under 2 minutes left to lift the Bruins to a series-deciding Game 5 victory against the Whalers. He also had the series-winning goal against the Capitals. The next year, he tore it up over his 19 playoff games, scoring 16 goals with 4 game winners, including the series winner in Game 7 against the Canadiens. However, in the conference finals against the Pittsburgh Penguins, he was targeted by Ulf Samuelsson, especially in Game 6 with what became a career-altering knee-on-knee collision. Alright, for the Ottawa Senators, I did consider Erik Karlsson and his 2 Norris trophies and his heroic 2017 playoffs, but I can't deny Mr. Senator Daniel Alfredsson, especially since he got his team to the final that came in 07. That postseason, he recorded a playoff high 22 points, including a league-leading 14 goals, and 4 of his tallies were game winners. In the conference final, he scored the lone goal against Ryan Miller in Game 3. The Sabres took Game 4, but in overtime of Game 5, Alfie struck again. Those Senators teams were nearly perennial wagons, and in 121 playoff games with Ottawa, he scored 51 goals, 11 of them game winners, in addition to 49 assists. And for the Red Wings, I chose Norm Ullman from the original 6 era. In 80 postseason games, he scored 27 goals and added 47 assists for 74 points, and twice he led the playoffs in scoring. Ullman and the Red Wings made the Cup final 5 times. Their most heartbreaking defeat came in '64 at the hands of the Maple Leafs. After triumphing 4-3 in overtime of Game 6, the Leafs shut out the Red Wings 4-0 in Game 7. And lastly, let's finish up with the Metropolitan Division. So let's start with the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, I think it should be Eric Lindros, but since I've talked a lot about him in my historical content, and since we're really thin with the defensemen on this list, I'm going to highlight someone who doesn't get enough love, and that's Mr. Hockey's son, Mark Howe. Howe was a Norris Trophy finalist 3 times with Philly, and he did win the Avco Cup twice in the World Hockey Association with the Houston Aeros alongside his brother and dad. He reached the Stanley Cup final twice with the Flyers, in 1985 with the best record in the NHL, and then in 1987, but his team ran into the Edmonton Oilers, losing both times. He had his biggest offensive performance in the '89 playoffs, scoring 15 assists in 19 games. But despite having a decent offense, the Flyers were swallowed up by the Canadiens in 6 games in the conference finals. Montreal finished the season with 35 more points too. Now onto the Carolina Hurricanes. If we lumped in the Whalers, there'd be some great picks like Mark Howe and Kevin Dineen, but specifically for Carolina, I've chosen Sebastian Aho. He's been the cornerstone of the Rod Brind'Amour era, winning a playoff series in 6 straight years. Heading into the 2024 playoffs, he's scored 25 goals and 41 assists over 70 games, and he's been very consistent year after year. Perhaps his biggest moment was when he scored the series-winning goal in the 2021 first round against the Predators. He also played a key role in getting Carolina to the conference final as a 21-year-old in 2019 and 2023. Yes, we know they were swept both times. For the New York Islanders, I've selected Pat LaFontaine. The Islanders were defending their dynasty when LaFontaine broke into the NHL as a 19-year-old. He recorded 3 goals and 6 assists in their 1984 playoff run, but the Isles were bested in a Cup final rematch from the previous year against the Edmonton Oilers. They haven't been to the final since then. LaFontaine delivered his biggest moment as an Islander in the '87 first round against the Washington Capitals in Game 7. In what's known as the Easter Epic, the Hall of Famer scored at 8:47 into the 4th overtime for his 4th goal of the playoffs. The Isles bowed out in 7 games against Philadelphia. Over 50 career playoff games with New York, LaFontaine scored 14 goals and 22 assists. Now for the New Jersey Devils, there aren't too many of their legends who haven't won a cup. Jack Hughes is the most talented perhaps, but he and the great Ilya Kovalchuk had just one playoff run for Jersey so far, so I'm choosing Zach Parise. After Ovi and Sid and Malkin and Kovalchuk, Parise was up there among the elite goal scorers. He had 5 30-goal seasons with New Jersey. In 2009, he actually finished 5th in Hart Trophy voting. Over 61 career playoff games with the Devils, he had 21 goals and 22 assists. He was one of several players tied for first with 8 goals in the 2012 playoffs. He scored 3 of them to go with 3 assists in the conference final against the Rangers, but he was held to a single goal in the Cup final against Jonathan Quick and the Kings. For the Columbus Blue Jackets, well, Rick Nash is the all-time face of the franchise, sure, Nick Foligno as well, but the Jackets really became legit in the 2010s in large part because of Sergei Bobrovsky. Bob won 2 Vezina trophies and was a Hart finalist with Columbus. After over a decade of futility, Columbus was finally becoming a legitimate team year over year. In 2017, they won 16 games in a row, tied for the second longest streak ever. Bob wasn't the sharpest in the playoffs though, conceding 62 goals over his first 17 games. However, he turned it on in the 2019 first round against the 62-win Tampa Bay Lightning, posting a .925 save percentage and 2.42 goals against average as the Jackets won their first playoff series in stunning fashion. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's really a toss-up between Rick Kehoe, Jean Pronovost, and Sil Apps, and I'm not talking about the Hall of Famer, but I chose Rick Kehoe. All the other Penguins legends have cups. The Penguins made the playoffs 7 times with Kehoe, but they never finished with more than 89 points in the regular season, so they weren't that great. The furthest that they advanced with him was 1975. After defeating the Blues in the preliminary round, they were reverse swept in the quarterfinals by the Islanders, with Game 7 ending in a 1-0 nail-biter. In 37 playoff games, Kehoe scored just 4 goals and added 17 assists, but 2 of those goals came in the 1982 first-round matchup against the Dynasty Islanders. In Game 3, he scored in overtime to help the Penguins fight off elimination in a best-of-5. The Washington Capitals present several great options like Peter Bondra, Olaf Kolzig, even Dino Ciccarelli, but I went with another elite goal scorer, and that's Mike Gartner. Gartner scored 397 goals in 758 games with Washington, but he wasn't as much of a factor in the playoffs, just 16 goals in 47 games, but 27 assists as well. However, he did play a key role in helping the Caps win their first ever playoff series in '84. He had 3 goals and 7 helpers in 8 games. He also scored the opening goal in the Easter Epic that I mentioned earlier. The furthest that he advanced with the Capitals was Game 7 in the second round. And then in 1993, he made it to the conference final with the Maple Leafs, but his team was knocked off by the Cinderella Vancouver Canucks. And lastly, we've got the New York Rangers, and I say take your pick from Henrik Lundqvist, Jean Rattel, Rod Gilbert, Ed Jacquemin, and plenty of others. Now, I've talked about King Henrik on my channel a little, so I want to show some more love to another Hall of Famer, and kind of like I did with the Flyers earlier, talk about a defenseman, and that is Brad Park. He might be the best defenseman in Rangers history that's not Brian Leetch. He spent 8 years in New York and finished as the runner-up for the Norris Trophy an astonishing 8 times, if only it weren't for his future teammate Bobby Orr in Boston. Speaking of which, the two squared off against each other in the 1972 Cup Final. Park contributed 6 points, including what stood as the game-winning goal in Game 3, but the Rangers fell in 6. He got back to the final 2 more times as a member of the Bruins, and combining the 29 games from those 2 postseasons, scored 11 goals and 21 assists. But the Bruins were no match for the Canadiens' dynasty of the late 70s. Alright Twisters, so which of these players surprises you the most, and what current NHL player do you want to see win his first Stanley Cup? Comment down below, and again, if you'd like to invest in our channel and community's growth, see the pinned comment down below. Thanks for tuning in everyone, I'm Nick, and I'll catch you Twisters later.